And today's webinar is from the AEBG office with a CFAD update with Neil Kelly and Nicole Alexander of the AEBG office, as well as Jason Cozy from Product Ops, to go over a few housekeeping items with everyone before we get started. The PowerPoint presentation is available to download at this time. The PowerPoint presentation is located in the Resources pod, and you can just click on the file and select Download, and it will download onto your computer. If you have any questions, please be sure to post those questions in the chat pod throughout the webinar. Neil Kelly or Nicole or Jason will be addressing your questions. So if your questions aren't answered immediately, you will be able to, they will be addressed throughout the webinar. So just hold patiently. All of your questions will be addressed at some point throughout the webinar. The webinar will be recorded and available on the AEBG website later on this afternoon, as well as the PowerPoint presentation that goes along with the webinar. When you enter the room, please be sure to press the white or green sound icon. This will project sound for you. If you're having any issues with sound, it could be because your sound is not turned on. The sound icon should always be green, and for some browsers it will be orange. You are able to dial into this webinar. We've uploaded the dial-in information in the information pod, so be sure to dial in if you have to. If you are on a Wi-Fi connection and there is an interruption in your connectivity, it could be because of your Wi-Fi access. Please be patient. It should come back on. If you're still experiencing difficulties, it's best to log off of Adobe Connect and come back into the room, and hopefully that will fix it. If you're hearing an echo as I am speaking at this time, please be sure to check your name. If there is a number 2, a numeric 2 next to your name, it could be because you are logged into Adobe Connect more than once. I would advise you to exit out of Adobe Connect and come back in. Make sure you hit the Listen Only option, and that should take care of the echo issue. Throughout this webinar, if you would like to increase your screen to a full screen, you are able to do so by pressing the outward-facing arrows that's located up at the top of your screen. This will give you the full screen option. But please note, if you select the full screen option, you will not be able to see or contribute to the chat pod. If you would like to come back to a normal screen, you can hit the same icon. This time your arrows will be inward facing, and that will bring you back to a normal screen, and you'll be able to see and contribute to the chat pod. If anyone is in need of any technical issues, any needs at all, and you need to contact AEBG TAP, you can do so by submitting a support request on the AEBG website. You can give us send us an email at tap@aebg.org, or you can give us a telephone call at 888-827-2324, and we will respond to you almost immediately. Immediately following this webinar, there will be an evaluation that will appear on your screen. Please be sure to fill out this evaluation. It is a way for us to evaluate the content in this webinar and also address any technical assistance or professional development needs you may have and improve future webinars. So please be sure to fill out our online evaluation. It's very important for us. In addition, please note upcoming webinars that we have. We have a number of webinars that will be coming up on the NOVA system, fiscal webinars, policy-related webinars, as well as professional development webinars and data and accountability webinars. And you can check those out on the AEBG website under events and webinars. Now I will turn it over to Neil.
All right, thanks, Veronica. Okay, so I think we had about 180 people signed up. We're right at 100, so we might have some multiple people at calling in on one number and watching and listening. So welcome, everyone. The way the presentation will work today is I will do the first part, mostly on policy. Nicole will come in and do kind of the NOVA part, how this will work. Jason is available for technical assistance if there's some tough questions there, or you're having problems with NOVA. Nicole and Jason can answer those as well. We've given everyone plenty of time so we can answer all questions and even dive a little deeper on NOVA if you are having problems. For those that haven't touched NOVA since December, this can be a refresher as well. So feel free to type in the chat if you have a question. We'll pause every few slides to answer questions, so be patient. And then if you want to download the presentation, I think Veronica told you it's the bottom left-hand corner. You can download that PowerPoint right now, and you can share it with people that didn't come today, or if they want to listen to the recorded webinar, that'll be posted later on today. So let's begin. Let's look at the agenda. It's pretty jam-packed, but like I said, we have an hour and a half till 3 o'clock. We're going to go over some heavy stuff. We're going to talk about the allocation process for this year. We'll talk about the CFAD timeline. We'll talk about those allocation options related to your total allocation, which includes the COLA. We'll talk about the CFAD, what's supposed to be on it, and when it's due. And then we'll talk about amendments to that, if you want to do that. And then Nicole will come in and do the step-by-step screenshots of CFAD in NOVA. And then she'll weave into that or incorporate into those slides some tips for NOVA novices. And then and Jason will be available too to answer questions. And then lastly, I'll give you a preview of what we're working on for AEBG expenses and due dates. Those aren't due till June 1st, but we'll be doing some webinars in advance of that, probably in April and May to get you ready, but we'll give you a little heads up on that, and then we'll have some open discussion if we still have time and answer any additional questions. So hopefully we'll get to all questions. Can everybody, so it was, okay, so Veronica's troubleshooting with Jacques, and hopefully everybody else can hear me. So see anybody saying, can you hear me? So I'm going to move on to the first slide. Okay, so 1819 AEBG allocation process. So here's the timeline. As you know, January, the first part of January, the governor's budget was released, or is released. And then in February, we released the preliminary allocation schedules at the consortia level, and that included the COLA. That came out that last week of February. And then this month and next month, you're supposed to be having member discussions in a public setting to discuss the 1819 allocation of funds. And then through that conversation that you have and input and decision-making, you fill out the CFAD in NOVA, and that's due by May 2nd. So then the state gets those CFADs, and we put those in the interagency agreement between CDE and the Chancellor's Office, and those mechanisms help create the schedules that we send to state controllers to release the funds. So as we're working on that, the legislature goes through the process of approving the budget, and if all goes well, the governor signs it on July 1, and then sometime in August, hopefully by the end of August, sometimes a little later, schedules are sent to controllers for disbursement. So once those schedules go to controllers, then it takes some time to get to your county offices and then out to you. I think last year some of the members didn't get their checks or their disbursements until October. We're aware of that. We're going to try to work on that so it comes a little earlier. And that's kind of the process timeline. We're going to go to the next slide. Very quickly, yeah. So, okay, so next slide. Sorry. So the, okay, now I'm good. Okay, CFAD timeline. So here's how your CFAD should work. So right now you review the preliminary allocation amounts for 1819, right? That's taking place right now. You set up your public meetings for discussion of allocating funds. You get the agenda for any local board approval. You got to think in advance of that. And give yourself plenty of time for members to certify the CFAD in NOVA. So when Nicole and Jason go over the CFAD process, you'll see there's a certification online. It's no longer signatures that you have to run around and get. It'll all be online, but your CFAD cannot be submitted until all members check the box in NOVA. So you have to get this all done by May 2nd. If you fail to get this done by May 2nd, we'll use the schedule that you gave us last year, and we'll move forward with that. So what that would mean is everybody gets the same amount as last year, and then we do a proportionate share of the COLA. So let's say you got 20% of the consortium funds last year, you'll get 20% of the COLA. And we'll move forward like that because we have to put those interagency agreements in effect, and the state needs that lead time, so we can't wait past May 2nd to do that. It's a very sensitive timeline because we have to get that money out to you. I'll pause there to see. Okay, someone says, I'm new at this. What's the CFAD? So the CFAD is the Consortium Fiscal Administrative Declaration, which is another word for it's the allocation sheet that everybody signs on that says how much each member is going to get in the upcoming year. So for 18-19, the governor put X amount in the budget. We sent that out by consortia to everyone. Consortia looks at that, agrees upon how much each member is going to get, and then they fill out the Consortium Fiscal Administrative Declaration to tell us how much everybody gets, and then you have to sign it, meaning online it's a checkbox, but that certifies that you're okay with this and you are okay with the process, and then we take that and we work out the schedule to allocate funds, and the funds come starting in probably August, September. There's 11 installments, and if it comes out late, then it'll be 10 installments. First one would be the catch-up, so you might have 2 or 3 months. And then it's every month after that through the end of the fiscal year into June. So that's how funds are released. If you're direct funded, it goes directly to the member. If you're a consortium with a fiscal agent, it goes to the fiscal agent of the consortia, and then it's passed through within 45 days to the members. So let's see. So Lori, hopefully, yeah, okay. So and then here's another question. I'm just pausing. It's okay that I pause because we have plenty of time. So Kristen asked, so there is a new CFAD form in NOVA. We're not just downloading our own document. Correct. So Kristen's question is, we're not doing this outside of NOVA. We're not uploading documents. We're not, pen and ink or paper and pencil. So it's all online, including the certification signatures, all online, all in NOVA. So everything's going to be in NOVA. Your 3-year plan will be eventually in NOVA. Your annual plan will be in NOVA. Your CFAD will be in NOVA. Your budget will be in NOVA. Your expenses will be in NOVA. Your budget changes will be in NOVA. Your work plans are in NOVA. So everything's moving to NOVA, so you should get familiar with NOVA. And another question, if we want to change our fiscal agent for 18-19, can this be done in NOVA? Yeah, there will be a question, and Nicole will show you, that asks you, what is your fiscal structure for this coming year? And you can say, oh, we're direct funded, or we have a fiscal agent. And so that answers that question. You can tell us if you're going to have a fiscal agent and that's changed. You can inform us on that as well. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. This is a biggie because we've heard a lot of questions about this, and I'm going to take it slow. I want everyone to kind of sit down, take a deep breath, breathe in, breathe out, and here we go. We're going to go into allocation options. So these are the options. Number one, you could just do across-the-board increase. You could look at, hey, I got 15% of the allocation, whatever that might be, so I get 15% of the COLA. And you could allocate your COLA based on, the proportional amount that everybody gets. And everybody gets that share across, and it's fair, and it's based on the formula, and everything's good. So you could do it that way. But you could also have the option and this is, everyone has to be in agreement. You can't have 3 people wanted to do the across-the-board COLA, and 2 people wanted to give it to a new member, so we outvoted them. Can't do that. You have to get 100% agreement on the fiscal stuff. And if you can't get 100% agreement and you don't submit it by May 2nd because you're at an impasse, we'll just use last year's. So that's kind of the safety trigger that if you can't come to agreement, the state will make the decision for you using what you did last year and give the proportionate increase. Now, if you want to have further discussion, you can say, hey, we noticed that there's an area in our community that there's no services, there's no school, no college, no CBO, whatever, and we want to open up services there. We've got this provider that will go in there. Let's put some money over there. Let's put the COLA over there. And you can have that discussion, and if everybody agrees upon it, you can do that. Or if you have some new members that came in after the fact of all the money going out and there's no extra money, you could do that. Or you could say, hey, let's look at the carryover. Hey, you're bringing in, let's see, you have a lot of 16, 17 carryover, and you really haven't touched your 17, 18. So how are you going to spend your 18, 19? Let's shift that around. So you can have that discussion. And then another thing, let's say you go through the process of trying to help a member, and they still stop, they're not meeting the requirements. They're not showing up to meetings. They're not reporting their data. They're not helping with the fiscal process of telling you how much they're spending. And you're working with AEBG TAP to provide the reasonable intervention through technical assistance, and they still can't get it together, then you can do a reduction of funds. That's another way that could impact what you put on the CFAD. Or you could have a major project in your community that you want to focus on, and one particular or a few members are going to be the lead. You might want to put those resources there. So all these options are acceptable as long as it's 100% agreement by the consortium membership. So you have to get the 100% agreement. If you don't, and you don't send it to us by May 2nd, we'll just use last year's. I'm going to pause there to see if there's any questions. Okay. Okay. So John says, I'm going to start with John C. Do you mean use last year's allocations percentages? So John, that would be the CFAD that you submitted. It's not what your allocation shows right now, because so many consortia has changed their CFAD as of May 2nd, 2017. So we'll go back in our files. We'll pull the CFAD that was submitted by May 2nd, 2017, and we'll use that. And we'll use those percentages, not the ones if you went in and amended your CFAD like 2 weeks ago or something like that. So hopefully that answers your question. So David says, does the local school board approve the consortia CFAD or a member MOU from the CFAD? So you have your bylaws and charters. For the state AEBG purposes, we only want to see the official AEBG representative from that district sign off on the CFAD. If you have a local process to get board approval, that's on you. All we want to see at the state level is your official member representative acknowledging that, yes, we're okay with this document, we agree. So if you have a board approval process, you better get that lined up, because if you're going to miss that May 2nd date, you're going to mess up the whole CFAD, and it'll revert to what you did last year. So don't be that member that holds everything up because you didn't schedule this on your board agenda. And if there is an exiting board-approved agreement, do we need board approval? Is that existing board-approved agreement? So, I mean, that's up to your consortia. You have your bylaws. You have your governance. So you have to agree upon at the member representative. You can have all these local board agreements behind the scenes, but when it comes time to certifying, you guys have to go by your bylaws at the consortia. And so those could be a little different. So I would check that out. If you're the member representative, you should understand what, if you have a charter, a bylaw, or a governance, how your consortia works and how you make decisions on the money. Okay, so 1 second, I have to scroll up since there's questions. So John Warner remember that once a member is funded via the CFAD, they have a legal basis to that amount in the following year. So yes, that's true, John. You get no less than the prior year unless you agree to do something different. And that's why the 100% consensus is has to be in place, because someone might say like, oh, I don't need the money this year, they have all this carryover, so I agree to take less this year, but I still want that same amount that I had in the prior year the next year. So you can't penalize them, otherwise they won't sign off on the CFAD. So you have to get agreements in place to safeguard your allocation, like John's saying, because you have a right to get no less than the prior year. So if they want to do something different, I would make sure you have an agreement that says, if I do something different this year, it's not going to penalize me the next year, because I want that full amount that I used to get if I'm going to do something different. So, you know, you have to have trust, and it has to be transparent. If you're not comfortable with it, then I wouldn't go for it, and I would just do across the board if you can't come up with an agreement. Thoughts on, Kristen says, thoughts on how to respond to members who believe that COLA should go to teachers. I mean, that's a discussion you're going to have in the consortium. There might be a real good reason why they want it to go to teachers, you know, because we do want to see students being served, and we do want to see enrollments and meeting the community of need and all that stuff. And why isn't it going to teachers? So, I mean, those are the kind of discussions you have to have at your local member meetings. And you have to have that honest, open discussion, and the public has to be involved in as well. So, and then Annabelle asks, if you default to last year's CFAD, can it be revised later? Well, not really, because the money's going out, and we can't change that. So, I mean, you can revise it later to move money around. That's if everybody's in agreement. But, you know, I guess everybody could change their mind, but they still have to be 100% in agreement. So if you default and they're not in agreement on May 2nd, does that mean they're going to be in agreement on October 2nd? I don't know. So it sounds like you got some governance building to do where you're at. Okay, so John is good. Peggy says, when and where does the 100% agreement come from? It contradicts our charter and bylaws. So we said up front at the beginning of this process, you can't vote or outvote on money. It has to be, you get the prior amount, or if you want to change it, it has to be 100% agreement. So where this comes from is you could just go with the prior year and everybody's fine. Or if you want to change that and not give everybody the same amount from the prior year, then it has to be 100% agreement. Does that make sense? So you don't have to have 100% agreement like John Werner was saying. You just, the law says you get no less than the prior year. So that's how it goes. But you can't outvote people on money. You have to get consensus. You have to come to some agreement, because they're not going to sign the CFAD. If I got shorted in a discussion and you guys outvoted me, I would not sign the CFAD. Therefore, you couldn't submit it. So that's where the 100% agreement comes in, because everyone has to sign the CFAD. You got to be careful with that. You can't upset a member and try to outvote them or do an end run on them because they won't sign the CFAD. It's always been 100%, Peggy, on the agreement on the CFAD, because that means members all have to sign off. So we really haven't changed that. That's been from the beginning of this process. Wayne says, we have an over-allocated member. What steps stops them from not agreeing so they receive excessive funding? So nothing, because somehow you guys over-allocated them. So you have to work with that member to figure out a way to come to an agreement on if they were overfunded and how to rectify that in the future. It's simple as that. I mean, you guys really have to work this out. The last 3 years, you should have been building trust, transparency, so if there are mistakes or over-allocations, that you guys come together and work out an agreement. Otherwise, you're stuck. You know, if you over-allocated somebody, they get that same amount than the prior year, unless you have agreements in writing that said that it goes back to whatever amount that you agreed upon. So that's why the governance and bylaws are so critical, and the meeting notes and the public meetings, transparency. I can't stress that enough. Okay, so I'm going to move on just for a second because we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but I'll get back there. Okay, so CFAD deliverables. Creation of the CFAD showing the 2018-19 distribution of funds to each member of the allocation. So this is what's you're going to see when Nicole shows you NOVA and the CFAD document. You'll have a distribution of funds to each member, so that's where you put in the money. You'll have a narrative in NOVA explaining how the plan allocations are consistent with the extended 3-year plan. You'll have the certification by each member of the CFAD, and then you'll have the designation by the consortia whether you're going to go fiscal agent or direct funded for 18-19, and that's it. So the CFAD is very simple. There's the allocation of funds, little brief narrative on how it's consistent with the 3-year plan, certification by each of your members, and then the designation of the fiscal structure, and you're done by May 2nd. So let's go back to those questions. So Peggy, our community colleges are not allowed to hire people for 2 years due to backdoor tenure track. Is it legal to pay those teachers via AEBG though they are earning ADA as double dipping, or okay to do so? So that's a complex question. It's okay to blend funds. You can use AEBG funds in apportionment. You can claim that for FDS, but there's a process that you have to do. You have to follow Title IV or Title V and Ed Code regulations on the community college side. So Peggy, that's a real complex question, but on the surface that is legal, but you do have to follow state regulations and Ed Code. John says if a member has 2 member representatives listed in NOVA, can either one of them certify on behalf of that member agency? So John, it's really up to you, the primary contact. You're the one that's going to certify who is the official member rep. And so if they put an extra member on that form, then you need to edit it to take that off if that's not correct. So the primary contacts, the consortia leads, have the ability to make sure their member representatives are accurate. And then who needs to sign off? So if you're saying if 2 members need to sign off, and if they're listed in NOVA, I mean, it just depends on how many of your members are representing that district. So we only need 1 certification per member. So I don't think we need 2 members unless they're like you're giving them different allocations. So if you need more help on that, John, we can assist you offline. So let's see Jacques. Jacques has a good question. If a member agrees to take less than their previous year allocation and there's no written internal agreement that the member can return to the previous larger allocation in future years, does the member still have a legal right to return to the larger allocation? Well, I mean, that's up to you guys. If they didn't put it in writing and no one's going to own up to it, I mean, technically, if it's not in writing and it's not in the minutes, does it really exist? So really, you guys have to have that open and honest discussion. And if everyone's not on board, then you probably couldn't do that. And if they don't have it in writing, it sounds like you really need to look at how you're documenting this stuff in your meetings, if that's the case. And if someone's misremembering what happened last year and there's nothing in the notes, then that might be on the consortia, how you're running your meetings or how you're documenting stuff. Or it could be that member just misremembering what was said. So that's why it's important, public meeting, minutes, documenting it. That's why the Brown Act, it's all so critical. So when you're talking about money and people made agreements, and if they're not documented in minutes and people aren't aware of it, then you have problems. So Not much you can do there if it's not in writing and nobody remembers it. And hopefully there's trust and transparency in that consortia to say, oh yeah, I do remember that, or you're gonna build some animosity between members if you have problems like that. So always document your meetings, document those major decisions. Okay, Kristen says, what does that mean the allocations are consistent with the 3-year plan? So you have a 3-year plan that you submitted to the state that says you're going to do these activities. Every year you update that 3-year plan. You did that this year through the work plan and the annual plan. And so you're going to give us a narrative justifying how those planned allocations are still consistent with your original vision, your 3-year plan, and the annual plan, aka work plan, that you submitted in NOVA. And how does that justify those expenditures or those budget allocations that you're giving to each member? How does that justify or is consistent with that 3-year plan and that annual plan, work plan that you submitted? Second part, I'm trying to remember if there's anything in the 3-year plan about fiscal administration or allocations. No, that's all in the CFAD. So, but we're not speaking to activities, right? Yes, you are speaking to activities because your annual plan, Kristen, highlights specific strategic activities that go back to the 3-year plan. So the cascade works. You develop the 3-year plan, and that was 3 years ago. Then every year you give us an annual plan that have strategies that you're going to do. This past year you did that again. You gave us an annual plan based on the 3-year plan, and you gave us those activities, and you built a work plan around it. So those work plans have to align with how you're allocating the funds for this year, and you'll do it again in August, and we'll ask you to do that again. So just keeping consistent with the planning cycle. So it's like what we usually do in the annual plan. Well, your annual plan is based on your 3-year plan, so you have an overall vision. That overall vision is based on those strategic activities that you list every year. So if those strategic activities are consistent with what your overall vision is, then you could write that up in a narrative of how that all lines up and how the members are being allocated the funds according to that. Okay, so Brenda says, does each member certify in NOVA if the consortia has direct funding? Yes. If not, we'll just go back to last year's allocation. So that's a requirement. Okay, so we're caught up with questions. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Okay, so amendments, CFAD amendments. I don't think we're going to call them CFAD amendments. We're going to call them allocation amendments because the CFAD is a one-time thing every year. Due on May 2nd, and we submit that, and we run with that. If you want to amend what was submitted, so you want to amend your allocations, thus the word allocation amendment, you could do that throughout the year. So consortia may adjust and amend allocations throughout the program year in NOVA. And keep in mind, you have to go through the same process like you did now. So if you, after you submitted your CFAD May 2nd and sometime in November, you want to move some money around, you have to go back in, and Nicole will show you this process, kind of an allocation amendment process, but it still requires every single member to recertify. So you can't like have an agreement with one member and say, oh yeah, I'll move money here to you and we won't tell anybody. Everyone has to know, everyone has to sign off, everyone has to certify. So it's a real transparent and open process, and you got to do this in a public meeting. So you can do your amendments, and you can do it at any time during the year, throughout the year, and you can do it in NOVA. Just keep in mind, if you're direct funded, you might have a cash flow problem because these installments come out every month through June. And so if you're going to do a allocation amendment of money and you haven't got the cash yet from state controllers, then you won't have any money to move. So just keep that in mind, that you won't get that final disbursement until June of that year, of the fiscal year. So like 18-19, like I said at the beginning, the money comes out August, September or so, and you get installments through June of 2019. So if you are direct funded and you decide to do a allocation amendment, that cash might not be there. And then you have to figure out, if you're moving money around between multiple members, who's going to hold that cash, because you don't have a fiscal agent. So these are some of the things you have to work out for direct funded. Fiscal agent's a little easier because the fiscal agent can hold on to this and they have the funds and they can, a little easier. But it's not impossible for direct funded to do that. There's just a few more steps and you have to be aware of that cash flow issue. Okay. So I see John's typing. I'm going to go on to the next slide. Oh, it's Nicole's time, but Nicole, let's see if we have any questions before we transition. We have a good 45 minutes for Nicole. Any questions on the slides we went over on policy? Review the roles of NOVA access and permission in the manual. Okay, so that's for Nicole, I would assume, John. And then Nicole, if you want to come on online with Jason.
Yes, sure. I'll go ahead and answer John's question. So you've got two basic levels of user roles. You've got the consortia level access, in which you have a primary contact. And then at the member level, you have a member representative and you have a member contact. At the consortia level, you have several other role titles at the consortia level, but the primary contact at the consortia level is the only user role that can add and remove contacts to their consortia as well as to all of their member agencies, and they're the only role that can submit and certify on behalf of the consortia. At the member level, the member representative is the only role that can add and remove users at the member level for their particular agency, and they are also the user that is the only user at the member level that can certify and approve documents or things on behalf of the member agency. So hopefully I answered that question. John says again, member rep and member contact both exist in NOVA. Yes. At the member level, you have member representatives and member contacts. Member representatives have the full access level to do everything on behalf of that particular member agency. So while John is typing, I'm going to move on, and then I'll pause and if there's any additional questions. So one thing to mention, we do have screenshots on these slides of the system. So at this time, you might want to move your view mode to full screen. Just be aware that if you do that, you will lose access to the chat pod. And I also want to mention that as you see the screenshots, these screenshots we're taking from our test site or our staging area. So none of the information there is real, so don't be alarmed if you see your consortia listed. That was taken from the staging site. Okay, so again, I'm Nicole Alexander with the AEBG office, and today I'm going to walk you through the CFAD submission process in NOVA. And before I start, I want to go over a few helpful user tips. So as you can see here on the screen, this is the login page. For many of you, it might have been a few months or weeks since you've been in NOVA. So if you have forgotten your password, you can reset it by clicking on the Forgot Your Password link on the home page. You would just simply type in your email address, that's your username, and click on Forgot Your Password. The system will regenerate a password and send you an email to allow you access. For an optimal experience navigating the NOVA system, please try to use the Chrome browser. The Chrome browser is the most compatible with NOVA. We have seen issues with Internet Explorer and Safari and some of the other browsers. And lastly, when you're logged in, to make sure that you have full access to your consortia, please be sure to check your profile settings to ensure that you're associated with AEBG and the correct consortia. So your profile settings can be found on the top right-hand side of the screen where you see your name. If you hover on that, a drop-down window should pop up which says profile settings, and if you click on that, that's where you want to check your profile and make sure kind of everything's good to go. Okay. I'm just going to check the questions really quick before I move on.
No, Jason and I are handling them.
Oh,
You're good,
okay.
Nicole.
Okay, good. Okay. Okay, so once you log in, you want to make sure you select AEBG, which is listed under the funds located on the blue navigation pane on the left-hand side. The way you'll navigate through NOVA primarily is you'll use this blue navigation pane to get through the various pages on the site. And sometimes once you're in an application, you can click on the next button, which is on the top right-hand side of the screen to get you through. And I'll show you that as we get through those screenshots. And once you select AEBG, it will direct you to the main consortia dashboard, which is shown here. One quick thing I want to mention here is that as we have launched the CFAD process in NOVA, we have changed the navigation just a bit. When you log in, it automatically defaults you to fiscal year 2018-19. But if you are looking for your consortia 17-18 member budgets and work plans, you can access them by selecting 2017-18 from the year filter located on this page, as you can see on the top of the screen. So the system will automatically default you to the 18-19 year, but if you need to go back to look at 17-18, just make sure you select the 17-18 from the year filter and then select on your consortia. That'll take you to your member budgets and work plans in 17-18. One thing you'll notice right now is those budgets and work plans are locked down right now, but when we release the expenditure reporting piece, that will include a budget revision piece, and that will then reopen at that time. And so if you have issues with any of your carryover amounts or you need to make some budget revisions, you can take care of that at that time. I believe in April, late April, we're set to launch that. Okay, so back to the CFAD. Once you log in and you default, you're still on the 18-19 fiscal year filter, you would find your consortia and then click on it. Okay, so this screen kind of shows what it looks like once you get to your consortia page. You will find that it takes you directly to the 18-19 CFAD sections because that's what's happening right now, and that's the deliverable that's due. And you'll notice the CFAD sections located on the blue navigation pane on the left side. The way the CFAD process will work is that the consortia primary contact will enter and submit the CFAD information, and then the member representatives will review and approve or reject the CFAD. And I will go through what this means and show the specific screenshots and the steps in the slides to follow. The CFAD consists of 4 sections, which include the fiscal declaration piece, agencies and certifiers, member allocations, and lastly, the preview and submit section. So once you click on the fiscal declaration located on the blue navigation pane on the left-hand side, it takes you to this page. I also want to quickly note that as you are navigating your way through the CFAD submittal process, the top right side of the screen will let you know what stage you're in. So right now, we're still in draft mode because we're still entering our information and completing all the various sections. Also, as you're completing each section and you don't have any errors, you will see green check marks pop up on each of the sections. So in this section, it is asking you to either confirm your current disbursement method or change it. So you would select yes to keep your current method or no to change it. And so as Neil went over, you can choose fiscal agent or the direct funded model. This section is very important because once you select how your consortia will receive funds from the state and your CFAD has been submitted and approved by all the members, you cannot change it until the next year's CFAD process. So this dictates how the money will be dispersed from the state to the consortia and to your agencies, whether you're fiscal agent or direct funded and who receives what. Okay, so this slide shows what your screen would look like if you select yes to continue with the current disbursement method, which in this case is fiscal agent. You will also notice a message in red confirming your selection, and there's also an option to go back and change it by clicking on undo. So as you're going through this process, if you've accidentally clicked on something, there is an undo function to go back and change your selection. Okay, so this slide shows the selection of no, which is selecting to change your current disbursement schedule. And if you select no, you will see a message box in bright red orange, just to make sure you're aware, requesting that you confirm this change. And then once you confirm that you are in fact changing your consortia's disbursement method, it will take you to a screen to provide a justification for the change. So you'll see a narrative box here that requests that you enter information giving your reason and rationale as to why you're changing. Once you complete the fiscal declaration section, you would select next at the top right-hand side of the screen, or you can navigate to the next section by selecting it from the blue navigation pane on the left-hand side. So in this piece, yes?
Nicole, there's a quick question. So if they change fiscal, let's say you have a fiscal agent structure and they change fiscal agent, so you're keeping the structure, but you're changing the district that's going to handle the money, is there a way to note who that new fiscal agent might be? Is that available in the system?
I think that's a very good question, and I right now I don't think that there is, but I think that's something that we can look into and build. I think that might have been a scenario that we didn't anticipate happening, and so I don't know if Jason is on the line.
Can you hear me, Nicole? Yes. Yeah, this is Jason. Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. So currently there is not a display of who the fiscal agent is, but we should be able to add that fairly easily. So we'll add that to the list to display and add when we push out the next update here.
Okay, that's great.
There's probably a few other things as we go through the webinar that we'll probably want to address as well.
Yes, and thank you. I think right now the way it's set is that it's automatically the lead agency, if they chose fiscal agent model, would be the fiscal agent. But we're now learning now that that's not always the case. So Product Ops will work on pushing that update out, in the next update. And so, you know, we learn as we go. Thank you.
All right.
Yes.
So Nicole, when you finish this slide, let's go to the chat because there's a couple of technical questions that I can't answer.
Okay.
But,
Okay, well, I'll go to the chat now because I was going to get into the agencies and certifiers section. So let me scroll up and see where we left off.
If you want to start with Julio's, Segura's question about how do you change the member representative to certify?
Oh, yes.
It's a little up a little bit.
There, in the agencies and certifiers section, there is a place to update your member representative. And I think right now, since we've changed the view, that would be the place where we would need to go. So I'll be going over that in the next few slides. Let's see.
Yeah. Also, Nicole, I'd like to point out too that I think a couple of the questions. John had a question about where to find some of his member information. The member agency homepage or dashboard that is similar to the consortium one is not displayed right now, and that will also be pushed out here in an update with I'll say within the next 2 weeks, but it should be sooner than that. That was just something when we were doing some restructuring, we had to take it down for briefly. So that will be back up, so you'll be able to see all that information and edit there as well.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for that. Okay.
And then John, is that the same question as John I can only see the CFAT. I want to see my other stuff in NOVA. How do I get my member?
Yes.
I think you have slides on that, how to toggle between CFAT and your budgets and expenditures and stuff like that. Right?
When I can address that. Yeah, it's true. There is some pieces missing, John. And on the first screen, when you see the list of all the consortia and there's the filter there, Nicole had pointed out that you can filter by the year. If you choose 17-18 and select the consortium, you'll see the summary of the budget and work plan from last year. And if you select a member, you'll see their summary of their budget and work plan. Neither of those is editable right now, but as Nicole mentioned, they will be editable soon before the fiscal expenditure and reporting comes due. It opens up.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that. So Bill with Sierra has a question. If we use a fiscal agent, do they take an indirect, or is indirect cost only to be for your district, as fiscal agent is only to act as a pass-through? Is it proper to take indirect costs in these transactions?
So I can take care of that, Nicole. So, Bill, all members can take an indirect charge. The trailer bill language that is in the governor's budget says no more than 5% for members. And if you're a K-12 member, it's your CDE rate or 5%, whichever's less. So if you have a CDE approved rate of 3%, you can only take the 3%. You can't take the 5%. So on top of that, the consortia can take up to 5% of the allocation for the consortia for administrative fiscal purposes. So when they mean administrative, it's fiscal in nature. And that admin is not guaranteed at the consortia level. That has to be negotiated among members of how much the cost of running the consortia is and how much they're going to charge for those administrative fees to provide a fiscal oversight. So that has to be discussed at the consortia level among members. How much is the consortia going to cost this year? What does that consist of? What's program? What's indirect or admin? And is it more than the 5%? And is everybody comfortable with that? And if they're comfortable with that, then how are you going to pay for that? Which members are going to contribute to that consortia budget? Is it going to be this one member that holds those funds historically? Or is it going to be 3 members chipping in? One's going to pay for the director's salary, the other one's going to pay for travel, and this one's going to pay for PD. So you have to work that out as part of that CFAD discussion. And so it's kind of more than the indirect question, but it does get at that consortia level administrative charge. So that's
all right, thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Nicole.
We also have another question that says, can we also add disclaimer for members to certify that they agree? I'll show you the approval process from the members, but when they select approve, that's assuming that they're agreeing with the CFAD, that they've reviewed it, they're in agreement with the allocations. We'll get to the flow in the slides to come, but it is tied to their email address so that we know that it's that particular member representative that's approving on behalf of their member agency. So hopefully I answered your question, but please let me know if you need more information. Okay. Okay, so I'll move on. Okay, so moving into the next slide, this is the agencies and certifiers section. This section asks you to confirm who the member agencies and representatives are of your consortia. And so in this view, you'll see all of your member agencies listed, and it pulls all of the designated member representatives. If you need to, in the following slides, I'll show you how you can remove a member representative or how you can add a member representative using the Add Certifier button. You'll see that for many of you, this section already shows a green check mark, and that's because technically this section is done if you already had all of your member reps for all of your member agencies, and it's just pulled from the information that you have previously entered, but it's asking you to confirm. But if this section shows a red exclamation point instead of a green check mark on the blue navigation pane, you have a member agency that does not have a member representative that's identified as certified. So there's a couple of things here. You want to make sure that all of your member agencies are listed in this section, and you want to make sure that the appropriate people are listed as member representatives for that member agency, and you want to make sure that every member agency has a member representative identified. And so if you do need to add a member representative to an agency, you will need to add a member rep by clicking on the Add Certifier button that's in the text box of that particular member agency. And so we'll go through this step in a minute. All member agencies need to approve the CFAD regardless of whether or not they receive funding. So this kind of goes back to what Neil was saying. It's a 100% agreement regardless of who's receiving funding or not. If they're a member of the consortia, then they need to agree. In cases in which you have more than one member representative listed for an agency, this is okay. Both will have the ability to approve, and the system will accept whoever gets to it first. So only one person needs to approve. So for those agencies that have more than one member representative, they will need to work out internally who they want to be the final approver. But whoever gets to it first and clicks that approve or reject button, the system will accept. Okay, so this screen shows adding and removing certifiers. So this is just a snippet of the page of the agencies and certifiers section. And so for this particular member agency, they've got 2 certifiers listed. If they'd like to remove one, you would click on the trash can icon that's next to that individual's name. And as I mentioned earlier, to add a certifier, you click on the Add Certifier button that's listed directly below the names on the lower left-hand side of the screen, and go through the prompts. So this next screen shows what that looks like. So once you click on the Add Certifier button, a pop-up window will appear for you to enter the name of the person that you're adding. If they are already a NOVA user, their name should appear from a drop-down list and allow you to select them. If they're not already a NOVA user, they can be added by clicking on the Invite Them Here link, which is at the top of the text box, and you'll see the Invite Them Here is in blue font, and that is a link, and that'll take you to the form to fill out to invite them, which is shown on this next slide. So once you click on that link, a pop-up window will appear for you to enter their first and last name and email address. There are other fields in this form, but the required field to be able to invite them is the first, the last name, and email address, as indicated by the red highlight next to those fields. And then you would simply click on Invite to send them an email. They will receive an email message which will give them instructions and prompts to be able to access the system, to become a NOVA user and become a member representative. So for many of you who remembered what it was like, the steps that you had to take to add the member contacts previously when we were adding folks to get your budgets entered, this is a more streamlined approach. You no longer have to send them a link. The system will automatically send them an email with a prompt to get them set up. Okay, so moving into the next section, this is the member allocation section. This section is,
So
okay.
Nicole, there was a quick question by Julio. He just said the Add Certifiers radio button is missing, but I think you covered that in your slide where the Certifiers button is.
They should
Add
be an
Certifiers.
Add Certifier. I believe this might only be visible by the consortia primary contact, because they're the that's the user role that is responsible for entering the information and submitting the CFAD. But if you'd like to contact me offline, I can look into the specific details of your consortia. Okay, so now moving into the member allocation section. This section is asking that you enter your 18-19 allocations for your consortia members. You should see all of your member agencies listed with fields for you to enter the amount. The total remaining amount that is shown in red is the amount that has not been allocated. So as you enter the member allocations, the total remaining amount will decrease. And when you have completed this section, you should show $0 under total remaining. So all of your funds need to be allocated out. So this screen shows an example of what this section should look like as you are entering your allocation amounts. You'll see that as you go through each allocation and you're entering them, your total remaining amount will decrease. And then this screen shows what it should look like after you have completed entering your allocation. So you'll notice that the red is gone and the total remaining is now at $0. Okay, and so once you have allocated all of your funds, this is what it should look like. You'll notice that it still indicates that you're still in draft form, but you would click Next on the Next button, which is located on the top right-hand side of the screen, or you can click to the next section from the blue navigation pane on the left-hand side. So moving into the last section, this is the Preview and Submit section. This section is where you will conduct a final review of your CFAD information. Once you're ready, you would click on the Submit button that's located on the top right-hand side of the screen. And then it will be submitted. And then once you click on Submit, a dialog box will appear to confirm your submission and also allow you to add any comments to send to your member reps that you'd like to note. These comments will be included in the email that they will receive that the CFAD has been submitted. And then once you've submitted the CFAD, you will see that the status on the top right-hand side of the screen will now appear as submitted. So this means that it's been submitted, so you're halfway done. And so now we're going to go into the member approval section. Was there a question, Neil? Oh, Jason? Hi.
Oh, this is Jason. I just wanted to chime in quick. We had talked about on the submittal of CFAD, if you anticipated any sort of allocation changes in the next month to what would be in the CFAD, hold off on submitting your CFAD until you get all of that approved, because once the CFAD is submitted and every member representative approves it, there is no way to then go back and edit it.
Yes, thank you for that reminder. Yes, please be aware of that once it's submitted and all members have approved, it locks it down.
So quick question, Nicole. Sherry said, I noticed the COLA is pre-populated. Does that mean we plan ahead as if the COLA has been approved? So when you go into the CFAD, you won't separate your allocation from the COLA. You will give a total amount for each member. So we don't want the COLA separated out. Just like any increase or any allocation in the governor's budget, every year we get $500 million. The last 2 years we got $500 million. This year we got $520.5 million. So we always assume that the governor is going to sign on July 1 that we're going to get that money, and that's why we have to do the CFAD process in advance. That's why we do the preliminary allocations ahead of time, because if we waited to see if the governor is going to sign it and get our money, then we're 6 months behind the process and we'd never get the money out. So we do have to assume that the 520 is coming to us, just like the last 2 years, that the 500 million was coming to us, and that's why we go through this process every year. So sorry, Nicole, I just had to interject that.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you. And thanks for checking the chat box for me. I'm not
I
good
think we're all up to speed on that.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so I just concluded the responsibility of the primary contact, the consortia primary contact, to submit the CFAD. So now we will go into the process for each member agency to approve the CFAD. And once the CFAD is submitted, the member representatives will receive an email with a link to access the CFAD. And so the email will look just like this. It will let them know that their CFAD for their consortia has been submitted for approval, and that as a member representative, they will need to review and approve or reject. There's a link to access the CFAD, and it also includes any comments that the consortia lead included in their submission for the members. So when the member representative clicks on the link in the email, it directs them to this page, which shows the CFAD as well as the approval status of each member agency. Because I wasn't able to include the entire screenshot in this slide, at the top of the screen is the actual CFAD information and the allocations. And then when you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, that shows the certification section, and it has each member representative listed, and it shows their status of whether they've rejected, approved, or whether it's still waiting for their approval. And if you are a member representative, you will only be able to reject or approve the CFAD on behalf of your member agency. So as a member representative, when you receive the email, that link is tied to your email address. And so when you click on that link, it'll automatically take you to this page. There's no need for you to log in. The system automatically recognizes your email as that particular user. So I just wanted to show what it looks like if you've decided to reject the CFAD. So if you select Reject to disapprove the CFAD, a dialog box will appear for you to enter any comments with the reason for the rejection, which will then notify all of the other member representatives. And this screen shows what it looks like when a member representative has rejected the CFAD. So you can see in this case only one member rep rejected. The other 5 have approved. But because one of the members has rejected, it cannot be officially submitted until everyone approves.
Yes, and Nicole, in this case, the primary lead of the consortia would then need to resubmit this CFAD for it to go back through the full approval process, and all member representatives would need to approve again.
Yes. Yes, so it doesn't get locked down until everyone has approved. So if you have one rejection, you'll need to go back and redo and resend it out. And Jason, I did see a quick question from Melissa. Is the email necessary? Can they just log in to NOVA? I believe from my understanding that they can.
Yes. If they have an account, which they should, all as member representatives, if they log in and they go to the CFAD preview step, the last step of the CFAD, they scroll down and they'll see these certification cards. And I'm not sure if you have a screen for that, but they'll see an approve button on theirs, and they'll see the status for the other folks there, but they'll only have an approve button on their own.
Yeah, so I went back a couple of screens, so this is kind of what they would see. So there's 2 ways. There's the email notification to let folks to flag or let folks know that it has been submitted. And if you can't find the email, you can always log into NOVA and get it that way.
So Nicole and Jason, let me throw a few questions at you from the chat. So John was just confirming that although the primary contact can change the amounts in the CFAD table, they still need the member rep certification for it to go forward. So the consortia primary can change stuff, but it won't go forward until all members certify that they're okay with it. That's correct, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of a relationship there. So one can't do something that the other doesn't know about, and vice versa.
Yes.
Okay, and then Jacques asks, a member wants its CFO to certify, but the CFO is not a voting member. Is the member representative designation exclusive for voting members, or can also serve to allow someone to certify? I mean, I would think that's okay because we're going to have CFOs certifying or approving expenses and budgets and stuff like that. I think there's a process, right, Nicole, to add people, even if they're not, quote unquote, the voting members, but they're going to be approving budgets and expenditures and allocations?
Yeah, so they can be added as a member representative for that agency if that is the individual that needs to be approving that.
Right. Because that's different than the person that's representing the member at a official public meeting. You can also have member representatives that do the fiscal stuff or help out on the budgeting or the work plans. So you can add as many members as you want, correct, under each member representative? Is that
yes, and you can have more than one member representative, and if you know internally what the the different functions are. But in NOVA, the member representative role is the only user role that has the functionality to approve and certify on behalf of the member agency. So yes, you can have as many member representatives as you need in NOVA.
And then I'm trying to figure out this question. Maybe you can help me, Nicole. This is from Tracy, should we input the allocation from the apportionment schedule? Do you know what she means by that?
I think you might be, so when you input your allocations, it would be the total amount that you're allocating to that member agency. The apportionment schedule is kind of the way the payments come out and how it's divvied up. But what for this process or for this purpose, what we need to know is what the total allocation is for that agency. We share that information with our fiscal departments on both CDE and the Chancellor's Office side, and then they determine what the actual percentage breakout is for the actual schedule of the payment. But what we need is the total allocation amount.
Yeah, I think we're using,
I think if I understand
we're using schedule differently than, I think Tracy's using schedule as the preliminary allocation schedule. When we think of schedule, we think of the 11 installment schedule. So, so a little different there. Your allocation that we sent out on the preliminary schedule should match what you're putting in NOVA, basically.
Yes.
And then, Nicole, how would Sherry correct a mistake on her 17-18 entry? She could go back in and uncertify, is that correct?
Yeah, so if you're talking about any mistakes with your budget, 17-18 budget, right now that's locked down. But when we release the expenditure reporting piece, which I think in the next month or so, that will be reopened and you can make corrections at that time.
Okay, and then this is a question for Jason. This was a little problem we had during the work plan submission. So in December, we had an issue with members certifying on their work plans and budget who were not receiving an allocation, meaning they got 0. Has that been fixed? And then how does that affect the CFAD? If they don't get an allocation, do they get to sign off on the CFAD?
Okay, so Nicole, is there a possibility to go back to the second step that shows the member agencies and the member representatives?
So,
forward.
the agencies
right
and certifiers section?
Yes. So, okay, so let's see. If it depends on which route you want to take. So if a member agency is doing some work or doing something and they're not getting any funding, but you want them to vote, what you would do is you would leave them listed here, right? But then that would mean that member representative has to approve it for the CFAD to move forward. If you did not want them to vote and they were not receiving any funds, you would click the delete button in the top right corner here for this Union School District, and that would remove this agency, this member agency, from the CFAD and the CFAD list. So if you could step forward to the next step, Nicole, I could maybe explain a little bit. What? Keep going.
This
is good. Any one of the allocation pages is good.
Okay.
Right here.
Oh, yeah.
So actually, can you go to the next one? Okay. So we don't have a clear display of it here, but if you deleted the first one in this list at the previous step, what it would show you here is it would show you, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, is it Allocations? The first Union High School district there, I apologize.
Allocations.
Okay. That would not have a numerical entry field for the budget there for the allocation. It would actually, next to the name, it would say that it is, what's the terminology we're using there? It would state that it's inactive, I believe, and there would be no entry there for an allocation, and thus they would not be voting. I hope does that sound clear enough? So if you want them to vote, you leave them here and you give them 0, right? If you do not want them to vote, you would delete that member agency on the second agency and certifier step. They would still be listed here as inactive, but they would not be required to vote to certify the CFAD.
Okay, thanks, Jason. So we've had it. So we're gonna just move on. I only have a few more slides of these screenshots, and then we can take questions at the end. Very quickly, I wanted to show you this screen. This screen shows what it looks like when a member representative that has not yet reviewed the CFAD, and there's an option for the primary contact to send a reminder to keep poking them with reminders that they need to approve. And then this screen shows a CFAD that has been approved by all of the member reps, and you will notice that the status has now changed to members approved. So this completes the step-by-step process of submitting the 1819 CFAD. I just also want to reiterate what Jason said and mention that once the CFAD has been approved by all of the member representatives, it is locked down and changes can no longer be made, even if it is submitted before the May 2nd deadline. And I think I saw a question about, you know, once it's been submitted and approved, only the state can make changes to the CFAD. After May, especially after May 2nd, we can't make changes to the CFAD because the CFAD amount feeds into the interagency agreement with that we have with the Department of Education, which then drives the allocation and disbursement to the consortia. And that we have to give ourselves a certain amount of time for that. So May 2nd is the absolute last date that we have in order to get the payments on time. And as Neil mentioned in earlier on, you know, we are still working on refining that process to make sure that payments aren't late. So that's why the May 2nd deadline is very, very important and very critical. And so that concludes my slides. Thank you.
So Nicole, there's just one question left. We have plenty of time for other questions. When is the earliest date the CFAD can be submitted? So when is this going to be, maybe that's a Jason question, of when this will be open?
I think it's open for submission now. I would suggest maybe holding off and not doing it too early, just because once it's submitted and approved, you can't go back. So you might want to hold off just a little bit. And also, based on the feedback that we received during the webinar today, there's going to be some updates that we're going to push out, and then maybe Jason can speak to those.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to have to talk about a few changes that we found out about during the webinar, which is great, and we'll be updating those. So I'm sure you didn't have your public meeting already. So if you didn't have your public meeting and you're submitting the CFAD, I wouldn't do that. Make sure it gets on your public meeting agenda, that the community is aware of that, and you have to have that discussion before you submit that CFAD and certify it. Okay? All right. So really quickly, we still have 10 minutes. So the expense reporting, we're currently working on programming, as Nicole and Jason told you. The member expenses and budget changes for 17-18 for Q1, Q2, Q3 are all due by June 1st. We'll have a webinar next month, a couple of webinars next month and in May to get you up to speed before the June 1st deadline. Consortium will approve it by June 30th. Members can take budget changes below 15%. You can do that on your own without approval. If it's over 15%, it needs consortia level approval. We also have spending targets. So if you combine your 16-17 carryover and your 17-18 new funds, 60% must be spent by Q4. And so if you don't do that, you have to file a corrective action plan on how you're going to meet those targets and why you didn't meet them. Just a reminder, the consortium administrative function, it's an oversight is required of members' budgets and expenditure reporting as it pertains to the 3-year and the annual plan. Consortia may use up to 5% of that administrative cap to pay for only the oversight activities. So you cannot include programmatic costs in the 5% admin cap. It's only fiscal oversight activities. And this applies to fiscal agent as well as direct funded consortia. The oversight option of how you fund it and what they do must be agreed upon and approved by consortium membership. That's what I talked about earlier. The consortium gets together, members talk about how we're going to fund consortia level activities. What does that entail? How much that costs? How much is fiscal in nature? Did it go over the 5% cap? How much is programmatic? Then you can discuss who's going to pay for it. Is it one member going to pay for everything, or is it a variety of members? And that has to be reflected in your CFAD as well. So you have to have all these nice discussions to lay out how you're going to spend the money and who's going to get what in the coming year. That consortia level oversight does consist kind of assessment of each member. So you should be assessing if the member has the ability to meet AEBG requirements. You review the general assurances that everybody signed to see if they're meeting that, and also check your bylaws, charters, and governance for any additional member requirements. There should also be consortia oversight and evaluation of each member as you review the 3-year plan, the annual plan, student data, other resources. Evaluate the following. The program needs as identified in meeting the needs of the community, your needs-based assessment. Evaluate the current levels and types of services. That would have to do with enrollment and any outcomes you have. Evaluation of funds provided to the members, looking at cost effectiveness, and then evaluation of member effectiveness overall. And we do have field teams that are looking at all of this, and we will provide more information as those teams move along. And then lastly, you would ask things like, how do you know your member is being effective? How do you know your member is making a difference? How do you know your member is doing what they said they were going to do? This is all at the consortia level. You should be asking these questions. How do you know your members' actions are addressing those educational needs? How do you know your member is meeting any enrollment or outcome targets agreed upon within the consortia? So these are the things that the consortia level directors should be looking at when they do certify the member budget, the work plan, the expenses, when you have that CFAD discussion. And here are the due dates. So June 1st, as we said. Then after June 1st, we have the August 15th. Annual plans are due in NOVA for 18-19. Then September 1st, members are to submit the final financial reports for the year. That would be Q4. Then the consortium has 30 days to approve that. Also, on September 30th, the 18-19 member work plans and budgets are due. Consortia certification comes 30 days after that. And then December 1st would be your Q1 for 18-19 expenses due by member, and then certification by the consortia 30 days later at the end of the year. So those are all going to be in NOVA. Those are all on the website. And I think that's our last slide, yeah. So I'll bring that back in case anybody has to look at it. You can download the PowerPoint. We still have 5 minutes for questions. So let's see. David, is the 60% at the consortia level or the member level? It is at the, how do we put, at the member, I think we have it at the member level, and I'll talk to the programmers about that, but we are going to look at that and discuss it. That's a good point, David. So we'll take that under advisement when we do the programming for the expenses and how we set those targets. So thank you for bringing that forward. I didn't really think about consortia level versus member level. So interesting. We'll have to bat that around a little bit. And John says, last I remember, tools to assist with oversight were going to be provided by the state. Is that no longer happening? So yes, that's part of the field team process. We just had our first field team meeting on Tuesday. So we could have the state people come up with great tools that maybe help you, maybe not, but we'd rather engage the field to come up with real good tools and tools that would meet your needs. And so, John, give us some time for the field team process to work through, and we are going to develop some tools for that planning process and that oversight process, but it's going to take a little longer than we expected. So in the meanwhile, you could use the state tools that we've always provided, but I think you should wait for the new tools that will be coming out. And then Kristen says, we don't have to identify our oversight activities in the CFAD, do we? No, you don't. And Paul says, how does the 815 annual plan vary from the 930 work plan? Is it correct to say the 815 annual plan is consortia-wide while the 930 is member-specific? That is accurate and correct, Paul. Thank you for putting that together. Heather says, we noticed that there were a few errors in the NOVA carryover. How do we reconcile these errors? So Heather, just contact Nicole, and she can walk you through that reconciliation process if you've had errors in the carryover, because the carryover came from the old system, and it was posted in the new system, so we got to be careful. So Nicole will walk you through that. And then Lori, thank you. Okay, thank you too. And Nicole and Jason, since we're out of questions, any last comments?
I just want to thank everyone for being on the webinar. Thank you for your patience. You know, as we're launching this new system and implementing things, there's always things for us to learn of what we need in the system. So thank you for your patience and thank you for your feedback. We really appreciate that. And thanks to AEBG TAP for helping us with our webinars.
All right. And there was a quick, Corley had a question about the incentive funds from the class report. Oops, I missed it. Sorry, let me answer this. My consortia, what becomes of funds when the courts do not use their funds as a get? So what happens, this is a good question, and we have 1 minute. If you don't use your funds, so let's say 16-17 funds will be ending at the end of the year. If you don't use those funds, they go back to the general fund. We have no control over them. So please use your funds. It doesn't get reallocated. It doesn't get redistributed to other consortia or other members. We lose it. Your community loses it. So please look at those carryover funds for 16-17. Figure out a way to spend it. If you have a problem, contact me. We'll work it out. So Corley, I know you're good for it. And what happened to June 30th certification of NOVA? Oh, yeah, Emma, sorry. Yeah, the consortia has to certify the June 1st expenses by June 30th. Good catch. Thank you, Emma. And Jason, any last questions?
No. Thank you for everybody and some great questions and great comments. I just wanted to point out, I think Nicole might have mentioned it early, but up in the top menu bar of NOVA, there is a little question mark with a circle around it that brings you to a help page, and you could submit any issues or any requests and/or comments on the site or requests. That's about it. Thank you.
All right. So I saw a few other questions. We will get a copy of the Q&A from Veronica, and we will follow up with any questions that we missed, and look for the evaluation right after this. And we thank everyone today, from Nicole and Jason to Veronica and Daryl, and everybody on board, the 133 people or so, probably more, listening back at home, for participating, and look forward to more webinars on NOVA as we get you up to speed. Thank you for your patience, and we look forward to seeing you in the near future. Thank you. Have a good day. Nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.